Karen, how much money do you make?
Oh, it can vary. I would love it to be a consistent every single month, but it really can vary from anything between 5 and 10K every month. Ideally, I think like everybody wants to have some kind of consistency, which can be a little bit frustrating, or you can get a little bit panicky if you're not on target. But I'd be lying if I could say that, yeah, we can just sit back now and have a consistent guaranteed load coming in every month. So yes, it does vary.
I love the transparency. I love it. So how do you do it?
A few different ways, I've got to be honest. So primarily, I'm the CEO of Podcast Profits Limited. And what we do is we help people. We don't just help, we do it. We set people up with their own podcast. We do a little bit of podcast production services, so post-production work. Plus, I run a coaching program with a business partner. So that's across sort of everything. It's not down to one thing. Plus, there's a few sort of side hustles, as in, yeah, now we've built our podcast. Yeah, I get paid just for showing up, but nothing I can retire on yet. And then a few sort of affiliate things, because as launching a podcast, there are so many tools out there. Yeah, there are tools that we recommend that will get a little bit of a kickback, might be able to buy a cup of coffee with some of them and others a little bit more. So that it's a little bit varied, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I launched a podcast, and I didn't do it for the money. I did it just to build connections and everything like that. But with no intentions to making money right now, we just started in December of last year. I actually just got a commission check, I think last month, the first money that I didn't even know for affiliate links. And granted, it was only $100. In 2 months, I made $100. I was like, huh, that's cool. I didn't do anything. I was just doing what I needed to do. So that was pretty cool. Proof of concept on that end. So
yeah, all of these things, because they will be consistent, right? You at least now you can see where this can go. If you've only been going since December, and trust me, there are many people that aren't even doing that. Give yourself a pat on the back.
yeah, what do they say? It's like when people start podcasts, all you need to do, you'd be in the top like 10% or so if you just produce 21 episodes, I want to say.
Wow.
Something like that.
I didn't even know those stats. But the truth is that many don't actually make it past the first 10 episodes. And even with us, when I took this on, I took on a whole radio station, a digital radio station. And then I created a podcast network. So I thought it was great because I had this idea, because I was interviewing so many coaches, consultants, therapists, healers, from the conventional to the more woo. And I found, you know what? None of you lot are in competition. Why don't we collaborate more? And I had this idea of creating some form of directory for the public to come and find the right fit for them. Because some people, they might think they need a business coach, but actually maybe they need to deal with some money blocks or deal with some inner child work or all this stuff that maybe some people have never heard of. And literally 10 days after I had this sort of aha moment, the owner of the radio station that I had my weekly 60-minute show on said, I'm packing it in at the end of your contract. Do you want it? And I went, hey, yeah. And I had a platform then for other coaches to go and get their message out there to the people who need to hear it. But I would say I failed because just providing a platform was not enough. If people don't have a clear strategy and a process and they don't have the full understanding of what needs to be done, because there's a little bit more than just speaking into a mic, they were giving up. Some gave up after just 3 episodes. They got overwhelmed with it all. And I'll be honest, there's a few that signed up that never, ever published because they thought it was a good idea. They wanted to launch and then they got overwhelmed with what needs to be done, overthought everything and talked themselves out of it. And that's what we felt we needed to fix.
Somebody there to hold your hand to get it through to the next step. And that's what we all break down like a customer journey. Tell me what it's like, what somebody, when they come in, what are they going to get?
So with us, like we have quite a simple, and this is what we teach. We say there are 4 steps. Step number 1, yes, you've got to prep. Like if you have your podcast in alignment with your vision and your purpose, because we didn't, right? Me, like you said earlier, I started this out of lockdown. I'd put on an online summit, had 20 coaches, and I just loved it because I'm genuinely interested in why they're doing what they're doing and what inspired them to do what they were doing. And I was offered a weekly radio slot, and I just said yes. There was no plan. There was no strategy. And I just thought I'll figure it out as I go, right? It was my whole business. The problem with that was it was very disjointed. My podcast was called A Coffee with Karen, a cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. I thought it was a cool name, but did it really showcase what it is we did? I didn't know what I was going to do in the beginning. So no. So what we say is, ideally, your podcast needs to be in alignment with whatever your giveaway is and whatever your signature, if you're a coach, your signature online program. So it's crystal clear to the listener. So now our podcast is called the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast, which is in sync with the website, with our workshops, with everything. So it's crystal clear. So our step 1, once obviously you've got to think of a name and it needs to be in alignment. It's all about how to structure the content that you create for your podcast in a way that's actually going to attract your ideal client or even create them. Because again, that people don't know what they don't know, right? So if they're listening to your content bit by bit, they may become a client. And how we share how to structure it is so many people will say, I don't know, I'm a mindset coach, I'm a financial coach, I'm a this coach, but that doesn't really exactly what you do. So we say, think about what is the big promise that you offer people after working with you. Nobody cares what it is you do. Unfortunately, they don't care what you do. They don't care what your title is. They care what's in it for them. So for me, like people would be bored if I explained what it is I do. I'm sure you know this. Post podcast production's pretty dull. They don't want to hear that. But so what I say is I help coaches and experts get their time back whilst scaling their business and having fun through podcasting. That's the big promise. All the little bits that we do along the way is actually really boring. So we say when you're creating your content, that's the initial thing. And so I call this the 5 Ps. First P, pre-frame. Like you set up the podcast. What's coming? Who's your guest? What are you going to be talking about to hook people in to listen to the whole podcast? The second P is the promise. What is your big promise? What's the end result that you are offering if they come and work with you? The third P stands for the process. So because there might be many different mindset coaches out there, many different financial coaches. So what sets you apart from the other guys? What's your process? And I suppose that's what I'm sharing with you here. The fourth P stands for paradigm shift. Because as we've just said, or as I've just said, many get overwhelmed. Even if they want to start a podcast, they think it might be a great idea, and then they get overwhelmed with everything that they need to think about, and they talk themselves out of it. In your content on your podcast, or for me, I can talk about those kinds of things, about people being overwhelmed and how we help them overcome that so that we shift the belief in the and to, okay, if they're having those internal limiting beliefs, I've demonstrated how we help people get over that. Does that make sense? Then there are other things that would stop people, like time. So again, we might discuss throughout the podcast about overcoming those objections. And then finally, proceed. That's the fifth P. What should the listeners do next? Now, I don't know about you, but when I interview guests, I get to that stage. What should the listeners do next? They want to give everybody their Facebook link, their LinkedIn, their Insta. Overwhelm. When there's confusion or overwhelm, nothing gets done. And how do you even know that someone's going to go and check you out on LinkedIn? So we say you just want to give them, you're not trying to sell anything on your podcast, but what would be the next logical step for the listener to take? So that's the content process. So that's number one. You want to create content that's going to attract your ideal client, covering all that I've just shared, the 5 Ps, right? Because the idea is that you start to shift the belief in the listener and for them to think, actually, I was feeling like that, wanted to start a podcast, thinking, oh, is too much going on. Oh, Karen's shared actually how easy her process is. Oh, maybe I will take that next step, right? So that's the first part in completion. The second part is, okay, now you've done that, how do you turn the listener into the lead? Because you want to bring them into your world. And as I've said, not via your social media platforms, bring them into your world so that you can nurture the relationship. Whether you have a free community on Facebook, maybe Facebook group, but primarily get them on your email list because we have no control over social media. Your only assets are your website, your email list, and your podcasts. That's what you own. So you want to bring them into your list. And what we recommend is rather than, because again, people might not like to hear this, but nobody wants a workbook or a cheat sheet or a download. And there's too many steps. Far better to give them an immersive experience, audio course, video course, something they can binge that actually gives them a result. Because so many people want to hold back the good stuff. But the best way to show that you can help someone is to actually help them. Sounds obvious. So that's step 2.
Give everything away for free.
Yeah. Bring them into your world so that you can nurture the relationship. Step 3 is, okay, how are you going to monetize it? So yes, once they're in your world, what we recommend is bringing them into some form of monthly recurring revenue package, whether it's a group coaching or where you just meet once a week, once a month, whatever that looks like. That's going to help them a little bit more. And actually, I don't know about you, how you run your business, but for me, I used to run a load of discovery calls with people who weren't a good fit, right? Draining, exhausting. And if somebody comes in on a call, they're a little bit anxious, maybe, because they don't want to be sold to. And it's your job to move them to a place of absolute certainty that you have the solution to their problem. And that's difficult to do if it's a 15-minute call or even a 45-minute call. And most people want to go on how amazing they are, and you might want to try and motivate them along, but you might install more fear, right? Whereas what we say is, why not bring them in to another immersive experience like a monthly Zoom? No, I'm not talking about a webinar. Yeah, no slides, no need for that. Just show up and serve who's in the room. A deep dive into what it is you do so that you're demonstrating exactly how you can help. Then you have the option to sell one-to-many.
Is that the community aspect of that?
Yeah, that can be, that's part of the community. I would say there are other ways than Facebook groups. There's lots of other tools out there that you can use to create community. But I think that's what that's what they want these days. Yeah. the way I see it is you're scrolling through social media, and with all the tools that are available, AI can write a post, AI can create anything. In fact, AI could create a course.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're turning up live and having this community, you get to show up as you, your authentic self. You're not following a script that AI has written. It's conversational. You're showing up and serving. I think the way things are going, people are going to want that more and more because you're building on the know and trust factor. We talk about that a lot. Everyone, you've got to build the know and trust factor. And the trouble with AI, it might be saving us time. However, I think the know and trust factor is dropping because people are realizing that anybody could create those posts and they might not know what they're talking about. Whereas if you turn up live on Zoom and you're there to offer, you've got to know your stuff, right? You're going to get caught out.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, for sure.
And then once you've got all that set, it's just a case of get out there and increase your downloads, increase the listeners, and you've got your whole ecosystem in place, filling your pipeline.
You guarantee 10,000 downloads. 10,000 downloads is a lot to get. I can attest to this. That's a lot for a new podcast. How are you getting that growth and ensuring that's hit?
Can't take credit for that. It's our team. So we do use organic methods. So it will be down to, because every podcast is different, the categories are different, the audience is different, who they're out there looking for. And there's only so much, if you're on social media, that there's only so many posts a day. You can physically post one person, right, for different things. So we have a team. It doesn't happen overnight. That can take 6 months to get there. It's not because it is organic. Then there are other strategies that we also, because if we're getting that first bit, they've still got to continue. So we still have our strategies for growing the podcast and mainly, really, guests on other podcasts. Because bit like what I said about the giveaway being an immersive experience, one thing about people who are listening to your podcast is that they are consuming audio content. So if you have an audio course or video, because video is audio as well, rather than a cheat sheet or something like that, people are going to respond to that better. And then, of course, if you want more listeners and more downloads, why not go to somebody who's ahead of you, because their audience are consuming audio content and listening to podcasts. It makes sense. And look, I didn't get this myself. I didn't create this myself. This came from he was my coach and brought my business into alignment because, as I said, it was all over the place. And he now actually is my partner with the Podcast Profit School. And this is what he teaches. And when I heard it, I was like, why haven't I been doing this? Because I wasn't guesting. Everything was about my guest, not about me. And yet then I was going and doing other sales trainings and things on social media. It's what have I been doing? Why am I not using my platform for me? But as I said, it started out as a passion project. Didn't really know what I was doing. I was just figuring it out. And now we have all the ecosystem in place and it's working. It's, oh my goodness. Now we can bring that time in for people. And we say, go and guest. But also something that, many I think miss when they think about setting up their podcast and doing post-podcast production. They might post it on social media, but blogging is just like in the way it's evergreen. And you can actually create very easily using AI. So that's where we do use AI. It saves us time. From the transcription of a podcast, we can get it to create a blog post, create a one-hook sentence question to encourage people to listen, and then actually embed the episode directly into the blog post rather than a link. Oh, go and check my podcast out. No, actually embed it so they can listen then and there. That will help increase your listeners and your downloads. And as I said, it's evergreen, and it gives it binge watch Netflix, don't they? Or they binge box sets. People do that with podcasts too. If the content is right. If the content is right.
Yeah. How do you how do you create engagement? It's one thing to have a show, it'd be good content, but how do you drive that engagement factor?
You've got to ask for it. See, it's so funny. So many people say, "Oh, I'm not getting any reviews." I'm like, have you asked? People need to be told what to do, and then they don't mind doing it. However, here's the thing: I speak to many hosts who say they're going to give up doing interviews because their guests never promote their podcast. Because I suppose the idea is that hopefully you're getting in front of other people's audiences. People are busy. They don't mean it. They're not being malicious. They're not deliberately not promoting you. But if they're busy building their business anyway, they've come to be a guest on your show. Quite often, once the recording's over, it's gone out of their head. But it's down to the host. You've got to keep the engagement up. And many they want to avoid, it's like they're afraid to over communicate. Do you know what? I want reminders, please. Otherwise, because I'm going to forget. When a host says this particular episode is airing then, right, and they give me the blurb for the new, of course I'm going to send it out. So do the work for them. Don't expect your guest to create a social media post, they're not going to. What we do is we give it to them. We give it to them. There you go. We'll create stuff from the perspective of the guest, not from my perspective. So I'll create stuff for me from my perspective as the host. And then for my guests, I will also create some social media posts, a blog post from their perspective, because I'm not expecting them to do it, because they won't. And then I give it to them. So if they have a VA, their VA can deal with it. And again, I'm reminding them a week before it airs here. Do you want to send this out, this blurb out for your newsletter, or this email out? And then a day before, send this out. Make sure you're connected on social media platforms. I know I've done it, where I've gone to promote the episode and then I can't even tag them because we're not even connected. So it's all about prepping in advance, having a very clear strategy and process, and following it. And if you want reviews, something as simple as doing a screen share video on your phone of how to do a podcast review. Because people are busy. How do I do? I can't be bothered. They're not going to do it. Show them, ask them, and even better, if you've done it for them, they're more likely to copy and paste. Because I don't know about you, but I've been asked to give testimonials in the past. And I think, I don't know what to write. I'll do it, but I haven't got time to think about what to write. So why not give it to them? Give them as much as you can, and they're more likely to copy and paste.
That's a good idea. We send out a bunch of, so for instance, this episode right here, we'll create a bunch of content, create a bunch of reels, create all that. And we put it all in a shared Google Drive folder for everybody to share as well. But you do it you do it for the guest side on that end. We just have a big mix of everything. We need to start splitting that up then. That's a really good point. And then only putting that stuff for them
Yeah, because they might not want to use that verbiage because it's about them, isn't it? It's about them, the guest. It just makes it easier. And this is actually quite new to what we weren't doing that. We would, like you do, just shoving it out there and expecting them to use it. But again, you learn as you go and you tweak as you go. And I now even say 2 days after it's aired, I say, jump on a live stream. I use StreamYard. It means they can connect two of their social media platforms. I can connect my social media platforms. And we can say, look, we had a fantastic conversation the other day. Thank you so much for all that value you gave about XYZ. And guys, if you want to listen in, put the link to the Apple podcast link or the Spotify podcast link, whichever is your biggest one. Put it in the description. And then that means you've got in front of their audience before they've even created a post for you. So it's a double whammy. And it's a win for the guest and the host. So it's got to be a two-way street, I feel. So many maybe want to be a guest on my show when they are leaving everything up to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's good.
Yeah, it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be a two-way street.
And I'm thinking here too, as we talk about some of the process changes we'll probably make to right after this, just because you mentioned that's really smart. If in thinking of as being your guest, if somebody just gave me a big folder of a bunch of stuff, like I don't even want to go through all that stuff, but if it's, hey, just copy and paste this is already created for you. Like it's already done for you. I'm more likely to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think many, even with their business, they don't want to be spammy. They don't want to harass people. But look, we're busy. I need reminders. I have no problem because I might have missed an email. I might have missed some notification. There's so many different ways, aren't there, of communicating with people. It's very easy to lose track. So don't be afraid to over communicate. And then more likely they're going to want to reciprocate because you've showed professionalism, you've done the work, and they're more likely to then promote it to their audience.
Karen, where's the one place somebody can go to find out more about you?
I would say for us, the next logical step, if anybody is about launching a podcast and wants to know a little bit more about how we work, because here's the thing, right? There isn't a one size fits all. Our process might be very different to somebody else. And you've got to find the right fit for you. There's no right or wrong. They're all great processes. So if you'd like to find a little bit more out about that process that we teach, then very simple, podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free. And it's a short mini course where we dive into what I've shared there with you. And the thing is, all we do, the only thing we actually do is the implementation of that blueprint. Because you could read a book about what to do. You could go to YouTube and scroll through a ton of videos of what you should do, make you take action. And so what we're all about is stop overthinking it, guys. Let's just do it. So with implementing the blueprint, I actually co-host the first episode, which would be your business. We do all the post-production, everything that is needed. And on the implementation day, we go through the whole process from booking guests to getting them on, to recording, to editing, to post-production, to podcast promotion. Everything so that you have a checklist, tick, and then it's easy. Then there's no overwhelm. Because if I told you all the steps, you'd be like, I haven't got time for this. But when we show you and we do it with you, it is, okay, I could do this. I can do this.
Makes it a lot easier that way. Karen, I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you for having me. See, I'm not used to being the guest. Yes, this is a bit of a new experience for me. So thank you for having me.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Hey, if you're still listening, hopefully you got some value out of this or amusement. Either way, I really appreciate you for listening. My goal with this podcast is to build something of value while also showing others that it's possible to do the same. And what I mean by that is I'm not perfect at this. I fumble, I stutter, and I just want to show that it's okay. If you've been putting something off, This is me telling you to go for it. So I need your help in growing this, and there's two main ways a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and two is through word of mouth. So I can only do it with your help. If you can leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as post this to your social, it doesn't grow without you. Thank you. Talk to you all next week.